Stand in the atrium of St. Peter's Basilica on any ordinary day, and you will find the rhythm of the world's largest church beating steadily. Tourists shuffle in awe beneath the cavernous ceilings. The low hum of prayer mixes with the click of camera shutters, and the air smells of incense and old stone. But if you turn your gaze to the right of the main entrance, you will encounter an anomaly. There is a bronze door, ancient and weather-beaten, that does not open. It has no handle for the public to grasp. If you were to press your ear against the cold metal, you would not hear the echo of the nave on the other side. You would hear nothing but the dull, dead silence of solid masonry. For 24 years out of every 25, this is not a door at all. It is a wall. On Christmas Eve of 2024, the eyes of the world turned to this precise spot. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation, a silence falling over the square that felt distinct from the usual festive clamor. Pope Francis, frail but determined, approached this sealed threshold. In decades past, this moment would have been a violent, visceral spectacle. We must look back to the rituals of the Renaissance to truly understand the weight of what happened. Historically, the Pope did not merely push the door open. He was handed a hammer, often crafted from silver or gold, with a handle of ivory, and he would strike the brickwork 3 times. The ritual was physical, messy, and loud. With each strike, the pontiff would chant, "Open to me the gates of justice." Masons, waiting on the other side, would then demolish the wall from the inside out, the crash of falling bricks and the rising dust serving as a dramatic, chaotic symbol of the barrier between humanity and the divine being shattered. It was a clear, unmistakable metaphor. Our sins build a wall that is hard, cold, and impenetrable, and it requires a force from the outside, a divine intervention, to break it down. The debris was not merely swept away. Pilgrims would scramble for the shards of brick and mortar, treating the dust of the wall like holy relics, tangible proof that the obstacle had been removed. In 2024, the ritual was more subdued, streamlined for a modern era that perhaps shies away from the raw destruction of the past. The wall had been removed beforehand, leaving only the bronze panels to be pushed open. Yet the theology remains as potent as ever. This Porta Santa, or holy door, represents one of the most primal concepts in religious history, the threshold. By sealing the door with brick and mortar for a quarter of a century, the Church creates a scarcity of access. It reminds the faithful that the path to grace is not an open field to be wandered across casually, but a narrow gate that must be sought with intention. The mortar used to seal this door is not just construction material, it is a liturgical instrument. When the door is closed at the end of the Jubilee, coins and medals from the current pontificate are embedded into the wall, literally sealing the memory of the era into the architecture of the basilica. It is a time capsule of faith, waiting for the next generation to break it open. As the bronze leaves swung outward this Christmas, revealing the interior of the basilica bathed in light, it signaled the beginning of a massive temporal shift. The unsealing is the starting gun for a year where the ordinary rules of time and debt are suspended. The wall is gone. The obstruction is cleared. And now, the invitation is to walk through. To understand why 35 million people feel compelled to cross this threshold today, we must travel back 700 years to a Europe that looked radically different, yet felt similarly anxious. The year was 1300 AD. The continent was rife with instability. Wars between feudal lords were tearing apart the countryside, and the memory of plagues and famines was fresh in the collective consciousness. Life was short, brutal, and uncertain. In this atmosphere of dread, a rumor began to circulate, a medieval viral phenomenon that spread from village to village without the aid of printing presses or digital networks. The rumor whispered that anyone who traveled to St. Peter's Basilica in Rome before the turn of the century would be granted a full remission of their sins. It was a spontaneous movement, driven not by a decree from the top, but by a desperate hunger from below. The roads to Rome began to clog with thousands of pilgrims, ragged and weary, seeking a clean slate. Pope Boniface VIII, observing this massive influx of humanity from his palace windows, realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. He saw a spiritual need that was also a tremendous opportunity to assert the authority of the Church. On February 22, 1300, he issued the papal bull Antiquorum habet fida relatio. With this document, he didn't just bless the crowds, he formalized the concept of the Jubilee.
Boniface drew upon the ancient Hebrew tradition found in the book of Leviticus, the Jubilee year, occurring every 50 years, where debts were forgiven, slaves were freed, and land was returned to its original owners. The Pope spiritualized this economic reset. Instead of financial debt, he offered the remission of spiritual debt. This is where the specific theology of the plenary indulgence comes into focus, a concept often potentially misunderstood. In Catholic theology, confession removes the guilt of sin, but the temporal punishment, the need for purification, either in this life or in purgatory, remains. The Jubilee offered a way to wipe that slate clean, to bypass the debt of punishment entirely. This created a spiritual economy that transformed Europe. Suddenly, salvation had a physical coordinate. It wasn't just about prayer in one's local parish, it was about the labor of the journey. To gain the indulgence, one had to perform the pilgrimage. It validated the suffering of travel, the bandits, the sickness, the exhaustion, as a currency that could purchase eternity. The Porta Santa became the focal point of this transaction. Walking through the door was the final stamp on the contract. However, this invention was not without its shadows. The economy of salvation proved to be incredibly lucrative for Rome, and as the centuries wore on, the spiritual transaction began to look more like a financial one. The selling of indulgences, allowing the rich to simply pay for the privilege rather than walk the dusty road, would eventually become the spark that ignited the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther would rail against the idea that God's grace could be tied to a physical location or a monetary exchange. Yet despite the theological fractures that followed, the Invention of 1300 survived. Boniface VIII had tapped into a deep, enduring human desire, the wish to restart the clock. He understood that we are creatures who experience time as a burden, accumulating regrets like dust on a mantle. The Jubilee was and remains an offer to sweep the dust away, to stand at the threshold of a new century with a soul as light as air.
Fast forward to the present day, and the cobblestones of Rome are bracing for an impact that defies the logic of our secular age. We live in an era of digital disconnection, where virtual reality offers us worlds without boundaries, and the internet promises instant access to everything. Yet, the physical city of Rome is preparing for a tsunami of 35 million visitors. To put that into perspective, that is roughly the entire population of Australia or the state of Texas descending upon a single historic center within the span of 12 months. This is not merely a crowd, it is a logistical conquest. The Italian government and the Vatican have committed an estimated $4 billion to infrastructure projects to handle this influx. We are seeing a city known for its ancient, often crumbling charm, attempting to pivot into a futuristic smart city. Artificial intelligence systems are being deployed to monitor crowd density in real time, redirecting foot traffic to avoid potentially lethal bottlenecks. New subway lines are being dug, often halted by the discovery of yet more archaeological ruins, a constant reminder that the city is built on layers of its own history. The theme for 2025 is Pilgrims of Hope, a title that acknowledges the desperate state of global affairs, war, climate anxiety, and political polarization. But beneath the high-vis vests of the security personnel and the drone surveillance overhead, the core question remains: why? Why do millions of people still feel the need to undertake this journey? You can watch the Pope on a live stream in 4K resolution from the comfort of your living room. You can read the scriptures on a tablet. The information is accessible anywhere, but the experience of the threshold is not. Anthropologists speak of liminality, from the Latin limen, meaning threshold. It is that disorienting, magical middle stage of a ritual where you are no longer who you were, but not yet who you will be. A door is the ultimate architectural expression of this state. When you step through the holy door, you are physically enacting a transition. You are leaving the profane world of the piazza, the noise, the souvenir sellers, the bright Roman sun, and entering the sacred space of the basilica. It is a bodily movement that the mind interprets as a spiritual change. In a world that is increasingly frictionless, where we scroll through life with the flick of a thumb, the friction of the pilgrimage, the long lines, the tired feet, the crush of the crowd becomes its own source of meaning. We crave the tactile. We need to touch the bronze, to smell the incense, to feel the cool air of the cathedral hit our skin. The holy door offers a definitive before and after in a life that often feels like an endless, blurring now. The paradox of the 2025 Jubilee is that the more digital we become, the more we seem to hunger for these ancient, tangible rites of passage. The door stands open today, a gaping mouth in the facade of St. Peter's, swallowing millions of stories, regrets, and prayers. But the power of the door lies also in its finitude. At the end of the Jubilee year, the bronze panels will be shut. The masons will return with their trowels and bricks. The wall will rise again, sealing the entrance for another quarter century. It is a stark reminder that the window of opportunity for change, for mercy, for a new beginning does not stay open forever. We must walk through while we can.